Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Hotline League, live from London without an audience. We're in Mark's hotel room. This is his bed in the foreground, and boy, does it look messy.
Yep.
It's just a joke. Okay. Anyway, so we are in a hotel room, undisclosed location. We won't say where. This is the last live episode that we'll be doing before Mark leaves. Is that public or is that private?
It's
Should I not said that?
It's not public, but I don't care. I'm on the desk for tomorrow, and that's my last day of MSI.
Oh, and then you can do the tweet where you're like, and with that,
I don't usually do those. I started doing them a little bit more because they're free engagement. But honestly, the whole like, man, I had the time of my life in London. I fucking didn't. And I'm not going to tell you I did.
Well, anyway, this is my constant co-host Mark Zimmerman, and joining us is none other
Take the mic. I'm not.
than
I'm not a mic holder.
DonJake. Yeah, we're gonna trade the stuff back and forth. DonJake, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So I met you officially several days ago, and since then you've become an internet sensation, already getting yourself removed from the subreddit. But do you want to explain to everybody at home who you are?
So I used to have a full-time job at the Ideas Factory, but I've recently resigned from that, and now I interview pro players and sort of in a Nardwuar-esque kind of way, combined with a few other influences, just freak them out and make them very confused how I know so many things about them. But yeah, this is my first event that I'm working internationally, and we made a video on Yike that was really good, and got taken down by the Reddit submods, who I'm sure everyone is intimately aware that are very nice people.
And you are, I don't know what the Idea Factory is. Do you want to let us know what the Idea Factory is?
So the Idea Factory is just a sort of a factory where we come up with ideas, really.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
But you also do other stuff besides interviewing people, which is relevant to your presence on the show. Do you want to explain what that is?
Oh, 100%.
Yes.
Seems like a bit of a leading question, but I'm willing to answer.
Thank you.
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it answer the question correctly.
Yeah, exactly. But in any case, so I run Ruddy, which is what I do the interviews with. We're an org in the LC, which is an ERL. It's the UK and Nordics League. And then I also did a little bit of casting way back when. You might have seen me do LFL English broadcast with Guldborg, who is a prolific and delusional person from Denmark, who's also on the MSI. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
So you've done casting, you run an org, and now you're doing interviews. It feels like you just do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, jack of all trades, sort of not really good at anything, really.
Yes. Well, fantastic. Glad to have you on the show because that's what the show's all about.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of people who aren't really good at anything, taking calls from a bunch of people who don't know what they're talking about. But anyway, this is Hotline League. We are sponsored, of course, during our MSI coverage by OnePlus. And then we also have Alienware always joining us. Yes, thank you. To sponsor the show. OnePlus phone is in my pocket. I was going to pull it out for the ad moment, but this is the OnePlus 11, which people can go check out. And we'll talk both about Alienware and OnePlus as the show progresses. But let's get into some stuff. So what has happened since in the 5 days that we have done the show? Because we did one a little later last week. We did it on Thursday, I think, right? Was it Thursday or Wednesday? I think it was Thursday. Whatever. It all bleeds together here. So we've had a bunch of different stuff happen. So we're now done with plans. Talk about that.
Yep.
Golden Guardians made it out despite everyone's disbelief.
I'm glad my pop-off did not age poorly.
Yes. And then we also have some conversation happening again in the LCS around owners voting against Academy, which is very confusing to me because we talked all about that like 2 or 3 weeks ago when I did the interview with Needham, and now everybody's acting like it's brand new news. I'm confused what happened.
People still think that there's somehow any chance that it moves to 3 imports per region, per team, and that's not happening. Definitely fake news.
Yes. And then what else has happened in the past week? I don't know. Anything? Chat, you can help us. You got anything for us, DonJake?
No, I think it's just been. I think the most interesting thing for me was obviously to see Bong leave the event was not so great because I think he really brought a lot of substance and strong structure to the event. To be honest.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what you're mourning over the course of this interview, or over the course of this week. Okay. Oh yeah, I keep saying Academy, but it's Challengers. I try to say it, but listen, it doesn't matter. They changed the name, and now it's going to be dead. So who does it really even matter what we call it? Yeah, Licorice has been popping off. 100T news with Tenacity, I guess, was also the thing where it's It's been reported that Tenacity is out. I don't think that was on the last episode that we talked about it here.
There's a lot of LEC roster moves.
LEC roster moves, yeah, which you can talk about. Mark and I are ignorant on all things LEC.
We'll
so.
probably just not do that.
Oh, copy retiring. But I think what's fun, we were talking about this over dinner, is when we do get into the Challenger stuff, you can talk a little bit about the ERL stuff, which is great, and sort of the differences between the two regions. But then we also have, of course, the next stage of MSI, which we are going to be talking about. We drew amazing things. Odo Omne did an incredible job seeding the bracket for us with just hype international play at so many different levels.
I mean, even the takes in Discord right now are making my brain hurt. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm going to pop off at y'all. Just a heads up. If I pulled you for your format take, you're in trouble.
Yeah, so we're gonna speed run the show a little bit. We already say that, and then it ends up going long. But we are already starting to pull takes. But those are some of the things that we think would be great to talk about with some of you if you want to make it onto the show. And you all know how to do that already, so we're not going to do the spiel. We did that recently, but it's a bit of a different time for when we do the show. So hopefully, if you don't know how to get on, just type !instructions in the chat, and that'll be good. But before we start taking calls, how you been, Mark?
Been pretty good. I've been working a lot. People started getting sick on the broadcast, so did a little bit extra duty than I normally would have. But I was going to be on all 6 days of play-ins anyways, apparently. So it didn't change too much. Had a pretty good time casting those. They were a lot of fun. Overall, pretty happy with how play-ins went. I think it was a good bit of tournament play. And I'm excited for bracket. What do we call it now? Main stage.
Elimination. Yeah,
well, because
stage.
everything's elimination and everything's a bracket now.
Yeah. All right. Well, whatever. How about you, DonJake? You can take the mic.
Well, so
you guys are going to be passing back and forth.
I do keep doing that. I quite like. I don't know what it is about. I like you holding it for me.
I'm gonna start dropping it on the ground if you don't take it in the first second.
No, it's fair enough, honestly. I live in London. This is where I'm from. Grew up here. Hackney, E5, represent. You know, that's my hood. That's my area. E5, yeah, for sure. Don't do that. Like you can get in a lot of trouble for that, man. Anyway, so I live in London, and I'm not a fan of all these sort of indolent, work-shy Americans coming to this country and disrespecting our food. I think our food is great.
Did you say work shy?
Work shy, indolent.
What is work shy? Like
shy of work.
Lazy.
Not like the shy from the LPL.
Okay.
Like work shy.
And you're calling us lazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, I think you're too lazy to go out there and find the real good food that's here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we ranted a ton about the food stuff on the last episode, and people got angry. So I don't know what's going. Oh, Mark's running a second project right now. We won't get into what he's up to on his computer. All right. So yeah, but no. What's it been like having the event in your backyard?
It's been really good. I mean, I think the last time we had any sort of international capacity for League of Legends was 2014 Worlds, and even that was only really a quarterfinal. So to have a whole event here has been pretty good. I will say that, like, I think League of Legends in the UK is kind of a difficult ecosystem because I think traditionally we're a console country first, a lot of FIFA and stuff like that, and then a lot more like Xbox, PlayStation. So it's difficult to, I think it's been difficult so far to kind of get a real element of excitement for it, but at least for me it's nice I literally live 20 minutes away from the stadium. Yeah,
the stadium has been a little empty, and I get that it's plans, and so like maybe everybody should calm down a little bit, but
that was definitely the weekdays too, because as soon as Saturday and Sunday rolled around it was a lot more full. So I think it's just, you know, maybe there's something about esports and weekends that just seems to go together. I don't know. Maybe there needs to be some more data.
Yeah, I mean that's why they were so smart pitting Valorant there. You know what I mean?
That was a good heads up play by them.
North
I wonder how they figured it out.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk a little bit about your interviews, because you've been doing some. We don't need to shit on the Reddit mods a ton. Everybody already knows about that. But you don't normally do interviews. What led you to try to do coverage of the event?
So I kind of got recommended by, shout out to Dom Sacco, who's from Esports News UK. He kind of led me into just like, because I originally was like, wow, that seems like a really cool thing to do. And I was like kind of trying to tack on to what he was doing. I was like, I'll just do everything. Just like, let me like do an interview or two. But he was like, oh, just apply for it yourself. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to get it because we're just like we're in ERL.
Oh, they do not. They do not. Anybody that could get a media
this is a PSA for anyone who wants to talk to pro players. Like, just
don't say that.
If your laptop has like a web, actually I don't know if the webcam's needed. You can just, if you have internet, you can probably get in there.
If you were endorsing an unhealthy level of parasocialness
No,
there.
no, that's not true. Don't do it just to try to. But I think the joke has just been this that historically there's not.
What constitutes media is not the strictest.
People will call it gatekeeping, but I will just say like there's no gate. They just keep that shit wide open.
For sure.
As evidenced by your arrival in the media room.
100%. I don't belong here.
Yeah.
I haven't worked for this,
Yes.
It's just all these things. But yeah, I got encouraged to apply for it. I did it. And sort of, I've never really interviewed before. I did a brief interview with Kasing, if you remember him from back in the day. He was in TSM. So he plays in the ORL structure now. I did a little interview with him.
I will always remember Peter going, Kasing. I taught on a stream and leaking that Kasing was joining TSM many years ago.
But yeah, I interviewed him when I worked on the NLC. And then, so I hadn't really done this before, but I'd always had the perspective, and we were talking about this over dinner, of I think that a lot of pro players must absolutely dread media at a certain capacity, because a lot of the time, it's not that they've got a formal relationship. It's just they're talking to a random outlet. Random outlet has obviously certain parameters they need to meet and certain criteria. Like the person that's paying them to be there needs to be like asking them like, oh, we want to talk about this. We want to talk about X, Y, Z. I was just like, I'm already going to be facing that as a barrier. Let me try and break down that sort of rough exterior. So I guess my process comes from sort of just trying to freak them out a little bit. To ask them some things that they weren't expecting.
I have been very envious of the way that you've been able to approach it, because I think for so many of us in the space, we've been there's an inherent pressure to make sure that you're talking about the games that just happened. Because if you don't, I find that oftentimes people get kind of frustrated and then have the same experience you had, which is like the content doesn't end up on the subreddit. And nowadays, like subreddit traffic actually is not very significant for me. But the thing is, I love the conversation. You laugh. What?
People are always talking about the LCS dying. Let's talk about Reddit's influence dying. That I mean, you used to get like, no joke, when I did blame games back in the day in like 2016, I get like, 50 to 100K views, somewhere between there, and like 60% of my traffic came from Reddit. These days, if I post something and it's like top 5 on the subreddit, it'll be like 10%.
Yeah,
and it's nothing.
I mean, I'll end up with 10% off YouTube traffic, and then I'll look, and like 50% of that is from the subreddit. So it's not 50% of that 10%. So it's not a significant driver for me, but I still love that community, even as much as they are shitty to me sometimes. And I love reading the comments and discussion, and it's just a better forum for like looking at feedback on your stuff and like seeing people get excited about it.
YouTube comments are fucking worthless. Like Reddit still has value.
Yes. And so like for me, I always want it to end up there, not because of any traffic or revenue, but just because like, I don't know. And so I also often end up delaying content, because if you post the content within 24 hours of the game happening, they will slap like a spoiler warning on there, which kills the thumbnail, which also makes it like basically dead in the water. Nobody notices it because the thumbnail is what drives. So anyway, all this to say that like I have appreciated the way that you've approached this, where you've just gone off the wall a little bit on certain things, and I often feel such intense pressure to make sure that I'm like, okay, so where are we at on the tournament? How are you doing? Or anything going on with the team that we should be aware of or whatever? So that's why I've always enjoyed getting pro players on this show, or doing like long form content with them, because you get so much of an opportunity to like have fun with them in a way that I think you're doing, and that Mark has done with things like catching up with Double Lift and other stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know. I guess from my perspective, and kind of to respond to what you're saying, is I feel like there's a weird move, and not to like comment on any sort of like zeitgeist that exists in like a lot of what the media is for like League of Legends, but like I feel like when I first got into, so I'm 23, so when I was watching LEC and LCS way back in the day when it was NA LCS, EU LCS, a lot of the content I really enjoyed was like they would make all these little like the video commercial kind of things. It would be like Valentine's Day, here's Diamond Prox with his wife or whatever, and like XYZ, and it was like a really quick way. It was like it's a very traditional media way of like introducing and like debuting your players. You just don't massively like have that anymore, and I wanted to make something that's like, I feel like a lot of content is very centered around what they play, who they play, and them in the game.
Yeah. Well, I think, Mark, there's been a lot of discussion. We don't have to go down this too much because we talked about it before, but I mean, I think a lot of what you've been pushing at the LCS content-wise, and you've been working with some other folks too, has been somewhat a response to that, right? To try to get more personalities out of the players.
More personalities out of the players, kind of accepting the platforms that we're on and utilizing best practices for those environments, I think is something that some people have the way that they want it to be done, or that like they're used to doing, or whatever reason, talking about the traditional angle of this stuff. And it's like, that's not really the ballpark that we're playing in. So I think there's just some stuff that needs to get updated. I actually did an interview with,
Blix, right?
yeah, about the content and stuff, and kind of like catching up with Double Lift, but it's about just like in general content and NA and stuff. So it should be on the front page of Reddit right now if anyone wants to go look at it after this episode or wherever, hunt it down. It's a good interview. It was really fun to like talk in depth about content, because a lot of times when we'll talk quickly, be like, hey, I put a good episode, it was fun, blah blah blah, but I'm not like, oh yeah, I had to relearn the skill set of editing from like a new framework because it's a different show, and like talking about the specific things that go into one style of editing versus another, and like things like that.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, you and I were even talking a little bit about how international events are very hard to create good content around because there's such short time. So one of the things that Riot did this year that myself and some of the other media folks had pushed them to do was create a media day, or an asset day, essentially. They previously did these things called media days, and they were what you've seen in the past, where it's like a press conference with Riot executives, et cetera, and maybe like the two teams that are in finals. They usually do this around Worlds or MSI right before the finals day. But for us, I think there's a big desire to try to get a bunch of time with the different pro players. So Riot only did a media day this time for plans, but you'll see a surprise test that I did that we did some stuff with from there. That'll come out probably in the next 48 hours or so. And I know, Jake, that was where you and I met, and you were also doing some content with them there. And it's just like really nice to actually be at time with the pro players, not immediately after a game, because I don't know how much you felt this, but like it is, one, you have very limited time after a game is done to talk to the pro player. Two, if they just lost, it's going to be rough. If they just won, they're in a different place. It's just hard to do personality content with them in those spaces.
Well, I think it's just like what I was saying before as well. I think initially it's just like they don't massively want to be there, right? Like it's like a lot of the time. I think if it's like interview, I think like broadcast stuff is like a bit more, they're a bit more used to that. But like, well, yeah, I'm sure that you've got more of a comment on that than me. But I feel like you win a series, you want to be going out, right? You want to go and celebrate with your team, your loved ones, all of those ways. You don't want to go and talk to some weird guy in a hat in a room. But that's the first barrier of entry. And then sure, like even beyond like losing, like that's been, for some reason, I've been like uber lucky that I've only done one interview where the team has lost. And it was actually when GG lost 2-1 to BLG. And even then it was like you could scrape something positive out of it.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it's like to do. I'm going to have to imagine at some point.
It's not fun.
Yeah.
You'll see as Western teams start losing. All right. Anyway, happy to chat with you about this stuff. I think it's pretty cool, but also maybe it's time for us to grab some callers. Mark, do we have people ready to go?
Yeah.
Mark's Discord has gotten corrupted. We can pull some folks over here.
Oh shit, I've had this happen to me.
Yeah, just the Electron apps. It's okay. We can pull over here. So we normally have a chance, if you are in the waiting room especially, or if you're trying to get on the show, please hear me say this. Normally, we had the same thing on the last episode. Normally, Mark is in a different setup. He can go into the waiting room, do an audio check with you, make sure that you are good, and then pull you onto the show. We can't do that here because of our setup, so we're just going to YOLO you into the on-air channel, and hopefully you can make sure that your microphone is working okay. You can actually go into the Discord settings and like do the audio check in there to make sure that your mic is working, because if we can't get you on, we're just going to probably like boot you if your stuff is not set up. And that's not because we're trying to be jerks. It's just unfortunately a limitation of the setup. So you want to say something?
No, I was going to say you have to pull people.
Yes. Who do you want me to pull first?
Laserfruit. Sure.
Okay. Here we go. Hello, Laserfruit. Welcome to the show. Where are you calling from?
Southern Ontario, Canada.
Southern Ontario, Canada. Well, what do you want to talk about on the show?
So this is a bit of a rant on some comments Yamato made on stream, and also the Dive For You episode. But if EU analysts and fans are going to constantly talk down on NA fans for being excited and like happy about our teams at international events, and like tell us to temper our expectations, they need to start doing the same about their teams. And I think G2 is going to get absolutely dog walked by Gen G.
Okay. So, sorry, you're saying right now, like if EU is going to shit on NA so much, they need to also start shitting on EU ahead of their matches, and based off of that, you believe everyone should be dogging on G2 ahead of this coming up match.
I mean, realistically, I think they should just stop talking down on NA people. Like almost every year, there's analysts that say NA is going to struggle in plans or lose in plans, and that never happens.
So
And then
I don't have time to watch the co-streams usually during the show. So was there some comment in particular that triggered you? Because you seem a little pressed about something Yamato said. I don't know what he was saying.
it wasn't on a co-stream. He was just watching Champions Queue the other night. But I just hopped in the chat and he said that G2 is much better than GG, and like NA fans need to temper expectations about their team. And then I got harassed for 10 minutes in chat about being from NA.
The classic.
Sounds like you walked into the lion's den and poked the lion. I mean, you went to an EU casters chat during probably EU hours and were like, G2 sucks.
Which is not to say.
No, actually, because he made the comment and I just asked him like why he thinks G2 is so much better, and I said like I didn't even disagree with him.
You know what would be the best thing though is like if you had a tournament where like those teams had a chance of bumping into each other and then you could just like resolve it with like on the Rift. That would be so cool. I wonder if anyone.
Isn't it called Rift Rivals?
Oh shit, that's where. Yeah, I would think that you would just do it at the international tournament.
Yeah.
But that's.
They had a chance of bumping into each other in play-ins, technically speaking.
Yeah, if they both lost. But
yes.
Yeah. Anyways, point is.
Okay, so let's break this down into two different things. So, Mark, I think you already kind of did the rant on the last episode. I don't know how much you want to do that, or if we should just throw it at Jake right now.
No, I think it was we walked the walk that I was talking beforehand. So don't need to say much there. You don't follow NA super closely, right?
So I watched like a decent amount of NA. Like I would say I probably watch more EU than I watch NA.
Take the mic.
Yeah,
before Mark drops
we'll
it.
learn at some point. I feel like I don't necessarily have a comment on this. I think the nuance that's interesting here is less that there's a disparity between G2 and GG, because I think that G2 is quite a bit better, if we're being fair. I think we should still remain in the realms of reality. But I think the nuance here that's interesting is for sure that I think that we attach like a different level of like dogging on NA than we do EU. Like I think people want to hate NA and want them to do badly. And I'm interested in where that comes from.
I can tell you where it comes from. It comes from the EU LCS being kind of like the redheaded stepchild of the little esports scene for a little while, and like getting worse time slots and things like that, and less resources, and having a third-party studio and all these things. But that was like 7 years ago at this point, guys. 6, 5, 4? 2017.
I just think it comes from an inferiority complex. America, baby. Okay, everybody wants to be us.
I mean, so to be fair, Travis, you know what we should own? I don't know if we've talked about it on this show, but on this show back in 2017, we used to shit all over EU.
Oh, 100%. Especially Calby. When we had Calby on, Calby would make fun of EU as much as he possibly could.
Their viewership was roughly what ours is at now.
Yes.
And he would dance on their grave. And
yes.
like, you know, sometimes you and I would join in a little bit.
Yes. I not just join in. I think I was not nearly as bad as Calby, but I definitely love to poke. And to be fair, at the time, EU still was outperforming us competitively, so that felt like our kind of poke back that we could make, right? Which is like, oh yeah, you guys are so good, but also nobody watches your league. Ah, ha, ha.
We're gonna steal all your players.
Yeah, exactly. And so it felt like that was our sort of thing that we could push back. But now, like, they're ahead of us. Now it just feels like it's punching down. And I do feel like every international event we end up having, NA does some sort of sobfest thing, I will admit, where like, hey guys, be nicer to us because of course that we're not as
we're
good.
not
we
particularly likable, I guess is what we're getting at.
Yeah.
We're not particularly likable.
Yeah. So I somewhat get it, but I think here is I have noticed a trend where people like to misconstrue things to make fun of folks. And I think that with the LCS, people do this by being like, well, you guys are worse than wildcard teams. And for me, I'm like, no, we're not, clearly. Make fun of us on the things that you can make fun of us on, like how much money we've spent or our viewership being down.
Our owners wanting to kill our own region.
Yeah. Like there are, I am not happy when people make fun of us for those things, but it's not as annoying because at least then it's like coming from a place of, these are actual reasons to be whatever. You're not just like telling falsehoods. And so I think that's what I would rather see is like
Well,
people at least making fun of us for the right reasons rather than like
And I think, you know, for some people it's like, yeah, you can make fun of us and call us worse than wildcard regions, but it's different when like you go out there and put your actual belief behind that.
yeah.
I will also say for EU, they historically have been much better than us, so I understand why Yamato and like I don't know if you were I think clumping in some of the dive and your take caller about like the Vedius was very copium angle. I saw people in Reddit like going after Vedius for believing in G2. Like I have no problem being optimistic and having belief. So like I don't think just because like I'm a pessimistic person, I don't think that like you have to tell Vedius to be pessimistic too, or like realistic as pessimists like to pretend that they are.
Yes.
Optimists are unrealistic. I'm realistic because
Yeah.
I think the world's going to burn down every single second of the day.
I think where an element of it comes from a fan perspective, like being someone that grew up watching EU versus NA and being like very hard line drawn into that kind of like, let's be NA. It was like, I feel like there's been gaps at times and it's gone one way or the other, but I feel like one of the times where it started to get a bit more scary, like we talk about like the TSM period when you guys got Bjergsen and like all these players, we were just like, hey, these guys are cheating. They just have way more money and they're just like getting our players that are like really good. And we're just like, give us back our players, man. Like, and I feel like that's where some of it comes from.
Well, we have been giving you them back.
Yeah.
Very rapidly these days.
Of
If I
course
can
now.
just butt in for a sec too.
Yeah, go for
I just
it.
want to say, like, I don't think EU analysts should stop being positive about their own teams. I just think they should stop with the double standard of like completely shitting on NA anytime we talk about NA, and then go and talk super positively about their teams.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we also went what was it 0-8 versus G2 for a period of time.
Yeah, the
For
EG,
GG,
Zero, it
MSI.
was
Yeah.
0-6 at MSI and then
right,
1
but
and 1
then
at
they went
Worlds.
0-2 in groups too, no? Or was it 1 and
They
1 and 7?
went 1-1.
Yeah, okay, so it was 1 and 7
Yeah,
on
so
the
it
year.
was 1-7.
No one beats EG 8 times in a row.
Right.
So I think like that kind
Like,
of
and
stuff.
that's fair to like trash talk EG for.
But,
They
like-
got obliterated.
And I know the EU fans hate Mad Lions for playing poorly and like play-ins and stuff like that before. So it feels like those guys get their due in that sense of like getting I shouldn't say get their due to get attacked, but you know what I mean. Like people don't let that go easily. So I feel like it's somewhat balanced in that sense, where it's like NA still hasn't actually outperformed Europe. We've been a lot closer since like the G2 glory years, where they were clearly like one of the best teams in the world, and we were just salty fucks that we didn't have anything close to that ever. But outside that time, it's kind of come back down to like we're pretty close together. But
we had a positive win record against them at Worlds last year.
we also had a better overall win rate, I think, but that's including like play-ins and stuff. Anyways, point is, it's been close, but then Rogue got out of groups and we didn't. So like we haven't actually outperformed EU. So like they still have the ability to hit back harder, you know.
I think there's an element that doesn't help as well. What would you say is the peak international performance that NA has ever showed?
Finals at both
20
MSIs.
2016 though, because that was like legitimate. No offense to Team Liquid. I don't know what happened to IG that day, but
Yeah. I mean, but regardless, you could say it's either of those.
yeah, one of those two.
Those.
TL MSI series is the one where they got 3-0'd by G2,
Yeah,
right?
they set a
So-
speed record.
So put this into context, and I'm not trying to bash on NA fans here. Your peak international performance ended with a complete gangbang at the hands of Europe. That is sort of the best moment for you guys. So it doesn't help. Like if we're going to talk about disparity between the two regions, that is your shining moment.
I think that now I'm going to go back to the CLG one then. Our peak moment was CLG versus T1 at MSI 2016, I think it was 2015.
No, see, if you see C9 Worlds
2016.
2018, as it still ends with us getting gangbanged by Europe. So you,
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like your best moments, and I think there's a lot to be said about. I do think people like my main thing would be why do people want them to do so badly? I think there should be a bit more positivity, and I think a lot of that has to come from. I'd like to see you guys do more to promote like some of your younger talent in your academy structure, which we'll obviously get onto as another topic. But I think
What academy structure?
yeah, exactly. But like I think that when we talk about the differences, you guys have played catch up for a few years. I just don't think there's really do you know what I mean? Like I feel like you guys shouldn't get dogged on as much, but my point still stands.
well, and listening to what the caller said about Yamato, it didn't sound like it was like that egregious of a take.
Yeah.
It's like
Well, I think more so what he's upset about is that he apparently said that and then was harassed for being from America.
Caller, what do you? Is it
how
is
much
it
was
the
Yamato
harassment?
and how much was the chat?
I mean, the harassment thing is annoying, but like it happens everywhere. It was more so the double standard of him then going on to say G2 has a chance against GG. like I don't think G2 played that much better than GG in play-ins, and I think their series against Gen G is going to go the same way GG did against BLG.
I mean, I think JDG is the tournament favorite for a lot of people. So like in that sense too, it's also like a harder opponent. Even if G2 and GG were equal, which I'm not saying they are, but even if they were, they still have a harder matchup in I think most people's eyes currently.
Oh no, I think GG is going to get absolutely crushed by JDG.
No, I know, but I'm just saying like why would an EU fan have more faith? You know, it's like, well, they have a good reason to. I think they're like BLG C9 is maybe the closest, depending on what your opinion of C9 is. Like, but you know, GG has easily the hardest matchup by a lot, and they are arguably the worst team. So like, yeah, I get why Yamato had that opinion.
I think like the thing that annoyed me most was that he was telling NA fans to temper their expectations about their teams, which is fair. And then he didn't do that with his own team.
Well, but you also don't know what prompted that. Like maybe someone came into his chat and was like, "Yo, man, Golden Guardian's about to 3-0 JDG, motherfuckers," and he's like, maybe you should temper your expectation. Like I don't know the context of what prompted him to say that, but like,
I honestly don't either, because he made that comment almost immediately after I went in the stream, and like I was just wanted to pick his brain about why he thinks G2 is so much better than Gen G.
I can kind of appreciate where you're coming from the sense of like it almost feels like that. I mean, so I haven't heard what he said directly, but if based on what you're saying of what he's saying, I can understand. It's kind of like comes to me across to me as like don't get too excited, guys. But I think there's a lot to be excited of what we've seen from Golden Guardians so far. Like I don't think they're going to be like. I think that their tournament is going to unfortunately end against JDG, but they took a game off BLG. I think they looked like pretty decent.
Hey, it can't end. There's a double limb.
There's a double in them.
I mean, I will say like
I just don't know how the tournament works. I guess
if you're on Reddit too, like I've seen plenty of like I'm positive they are tongue in cheek, but like people on Reddit are being like, "Oh man, can't wait for him to gap 369 so hard he fucking goes like get ready to learn American," like
yeah.
There's like a lot of memes going around that like Licorice and the rest of Golden Guardians are about to like destroy this entire tournament. They're about to go to like even in my Discord or our Discord where we pull these takes from, like people are talking like this. So like, yeah, you don't know what prompted him. And like, as for having more faith in G2, like, yeah, maybe he's partly a homer. I don't know. People are biased. Who cares?
All right. Thanks so much, caller, for the conversation. Anything you want to shout out before we go on to the next caller?
I'll shout out you guys and Alienware. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the call. We'll catch you next time. All right. Who is next?
Does anyone know how to fucking pop out all the voice channels again? Somehow I shrunk them in Discord using a touchpad, so I don't know how to get those back.
Yeah, he's got it where all the icons are right next to each other.
Anyways,
who do you want?
Twitch chat will tell me.
No, but of the waiting room, who do you want?
You can't see. You can only see icons.
You can see it on my screen.
People left. I don't know where they went.
Yeah, so people left the waiting room.
I don't know. Just fucking grab anyone.
Okay. Here we go. Hello, Kimmer. Kimmer, where are you calling from? If you're here, you'll have to unmute, Kimmer. There we go.
I'm here. Sorry, I'm here. My thing will glitch a little.
No, you're good.
I'm calling up in the Pacific Northwest.
From where?
Washington in the Pacific Northwest.
Washington in the Pacific Northwest. Nice. What do you want to talk about on the show?
I was just going to say that I think GG is going to have a run back to the LCS Finals because of the experience from MSI they will get.
So, sorry, is this is related to a proposed C9 Golden Guardians match in the lower bracket?
Yes.
Okay. And so your suggestion is MSI will have powered them up going through plans and they will beat C9.
Correct. I think they're going to beat C9. On top of that, I think a lot of people are going to expect them to beat 3-0 from JDG, but I think it's going to be a lot more competitive a series. I think it'll still be a 3-0, but I don't think it's going to be a clean sweep. But I think that Golden Guardians have looked a lot better from the LCS Finals.
Well, a 3-0 is a clean sweep. You just mean it won't be a stomp. It won't be a stompy 3-0. Okay.
No, GDG is going to have to work for it, is what I'm saying. It's not going to be like, oh, LPL way better than NA. No, I don't think so.
It is so crazy to me. If you had told me in January of this year, just 4 months ago, that we'd be sitting here in London and there'd be a take of like, okay, I think Golden Guardians is going to hold up well against JDG and then and then knock C9 out of the MSI tournament, I'd probably be like, I mean, it sounds like a Hotline League take, but what is Golden Guardians doing at MSI?
I actually missed what the take was. What was it again?
You pulled it. The take was that we're going to have Golden Guardians eliminate C9 from the tournament because they will have powered up from MSI.
Probably not.
You don't think so?
Well,
Can you give your reasoning other than
World's we're international tournament analyst Mark Zimmerman right here.
I wish I could do that on the desk.
Why don't you? You should tomorrow. Whatever the casters will say or analysts will say something about how there's a chance that G2 will win, and you could just be like,
Trevor tried to do that once where Golden Guardians were on the Baron, we were casting together, and he's like, I don't know if this is a good Baron or not, and I'm like, it's not. Unfortunately, Golden Guardians bailed off the Baron because I was like, yeah, they're inting. Anyways, can you like, is there anything other than like, ooh, they're gonna scale up from the extra stage games, beating the playing team?
Yeah, maybe go ahead and expand on your take a little bit, Kimmer.
So I was just like watching a lot of like highlights in like some of the like calm videos that kind of get released from here and there. It sounds like the team is a lot more in unison. It looks like River is finding his spot in the team and kind of shot calling a lot better from previous playoffs and stuff like that. I think Licorice is playing like phenomenal right now. He's on like a whole nother level. He was like at the beginning of the spring split, bottom tier player. Now he's, he beat, in my opinion, beat Ben and Lane, So it's like, I just think that with the veterans on the team, with River and Gory finally leveling up and this team being in sync, that they can do a lot of damage internationally now and in current LCS.
I just think it's hard because I don't know how they're going to meet up.
What they're going to meet in the losers bracket?
No, C9's headed up.
Oh, okay.
This is all based on a false premise. Okay?
I got you.
Oh, no. So what I meant is they're not going to meet in lower brackets. They're going to meet in the upper brackets.
There we go.
After they both dumpstered the LPL.
Yeah.
It's going to be 3-0s on both sides.
NA fans do not have unreasonable expectations. Like we were saying,
what
following up off
the
previous call. I think the thing is like whatever advantages they might have gotten for like getting a little bit more comfortable on the stage, I'm not sure it's enough because at the same time, C9's been boot camping here for like 2 weeks already. So like they're not jet lagged. They've been scrimming the same teams. They've been getting a lot of experience, and so like there's not this gap of boot camp or anything like that.
Yeah, they're boot camping at the XL facility, which is actually where we boot camped for playoffs in the RL. And I really hope that they fix their ventilation problem because it can get very cold in that room. And we had to use hand warmers every day. So,
hypothermia.
Hypothermia
might stop C9 from winning this.
You heard it here first. That's a breaking story from journalist DonJake that there's a cold air issue at the C9 facility boot camp.
Gotcha. Yeah. And did Excel allow you guys to use their facility for free? And you?
No. So the current head coach for Excel is Hedon, and he was our coach, and then we transferred him to Excel mid split.
Oh, okay. So this was their.
Yeah. So it's like.
Thank you. You can use our cold facility.
No, it was like money plus boot camp.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. All right. So, what do you think of Golden Guardians' chances? I know you don't watch much LCS, DonJake, but with them facing C9, I don't know. What have been your impressions of Golden Guardians?
Like having so I'll go purely off. I'm not a guy that like massively likes to conflate or pretend that I'm like super intelligent when it comes to the game, but having spoken to him, if I was to bring anything from outside of the game, like talking to Licorice in my interview that I think is dropping very soon, so check around for that. But one of the things he was talking about was how, because one of the things I asked him is like, you've had a lot of variance in your career, like you show up internationally all the time and you kind of reach a new peak, and then domestically you struggle a lot. And one of the things he was talking about is how he was just very like weirdly honest about it. Like I feel like a lot of players aren't honest about that process. He was like, I just wasn't enjoying the game. Like when I was playing really badly, like I didn't enjoy playing it, and that was why the work ethic dropped. That's why the performance dropped. So I feel like for him, he's in a place where he's obviously feeling a lot better about it. So I'm excited for them. Like I feel like he's in a good place. He's really showing up against some of these international tops as well. I think they've got a chance, like for sure. I think going into that LPL series, it's like pretty low chance, but you never know. I think even if they take a game, it's got to be good, right? Like
I mean that's the kind of the fun thing for as an NA fan in these situations is like, is I mean, they will probably embarrass themselves because that's what all North American teams tend to do in these
Mm.
situations. But when they don't, it feels so fucking good. You know, like if they actually can take a game, or if they get some really great plays in or have some proactivity, I think it'll be super fun, because I think LCS fans have always just been disappointed whenever you see that it feels like we just sort of flop, do nothing and then lose the game. Collier, you're a little breathy right now. If you can mute, or do a little less breathing into the mic. So I don't know, Mark. You don't seem to think Golden Guardians are going to do it. I will say, I am as disappointed as I think a lot of us are in what the predicted results of this format are. I do think it is kind of fun to see what this Golden Guardians looks like after they've gone through the MSI Hyperbolic Time Chamber. Even if they lose to C9, I'm just interested to see what that matchup looks like. And this is an effect of the format. We don't normally get to see this in the West. It's very rare that you get region kills or team kills or whatever you want to call it. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of fascinated to experience it, because it doesn't really ever happen. So
That's a positive take on it. We have the format question next if you want to go there.
sure, yeah. Kimmer, thank you so much for the call. Anything you want to shout out before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I just want to shout out you guys. Thank you for having me. Shout out Alienware. And then I also want to shout out the All In podcast. It's my buddies. They actually just interviewed Izzdaer. So if you guys want to go check that out, that's on the All In podcast on their YouTube.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the call. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Everybody uses this show as a method to promote everything else. No, I'm just kidding. Go check it out. We're going to take a quick break right now to talk about Alienware. Mark and I both hanging out on Alienware notebooks right now, allowing us to do this show. We're doing a live show from a tiny little love seat, chaise lounge, whatever you want to call this, in a hotel room in London. And all of that is because Alienware is able to give us the hardware and support that we need to be able to make events like this happen, so that when we're on the road, we can still keep putting out cool coverage like this. So thank you so much to Alienware for checking or for supporting us that way. Go to alienware.com/Travis. There's a link that will be in the description. I see Numi putting it out there right now in the chat as well for those that are live. Go check out the M18, which is an amazing notebook. I believe I'm getting one shortly after I get back, and I can't wait to check it out because it's reviewed incredibly well. It's an amazing system, and for you might enjoy it as well. Again, you can check that out over at alienware.com/Travis. If you're not in the market for a system, go take a look at their monitors, because you can always use a better monitor, and they have some really cool stuff going on there as well. So thank you so much to Alienware. Peripherals, yes. They sell many things, and you can go check them out at alienware.com/Travis. So thank you to Alienware for sponsoring the show, and we're going to get into our next caller.
It's a Monjhall.
Monjhall, welcome to the show. Where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm calling from Waterbury, Connecticut.
From Connecticut. What do you want to talk about on the show?
I wanted to address some of the concerns on Reddit about the bracket draw for MSI. People whining that there's going to be a big lack of EU, NA, with EU and Korea on one side of the bracket and NA and China on the other side. And my statement is mostly that Worlds is more for cross-region play now with all the best of ones and the big groups, while MSI is more for competition, which this achieves.
Shouldn't Worlds also be about competition?
Can't you do
It's
both?
the World Championships.
They don't seem mutually exclusive to me.
So I would argue they aren't mutually exclusive, but lots of other games have less of this problem. Like CSGO is a great example in my mind, where often for the major they'll do like better seeding going into it, and then by using the Swiss seed system, their bracket's good. But Riot likes to avoid that a lot of the times, trying to treat all the first seeds at a higher level, which even at this event is better because they treated the LCK and LPL as their own block and forced them to opposite sides of the bracket, and EU and NA were in that second pool instead. So like, while I would say it's possible, it doesn't feel, I don't know, it just doesn't align with how League has been run internationally.
I think that you potentially might be the least suspicious Odoamne apologist.
like no one should be mad at Odo. All right, he did his job. He drew some envelopes now, I guess. Which, by the way,
Yeah, I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay. What the fuck is this system? So I've heard that they did this twice.
they did it for the LEC draw show after the finals
okay,
for the
okay.
draw show. And
what is this system where we just stick envelopes in front of somebody and then they just like
not suspicious
it's
here,
not- yeah,
guys.
like I am not okay. I do not think there's any foul play, and like the
No,
bracket
no.
is the best evidence of that. But like you could like there, it does not seem it. What is very funny to me is that many years ago there was a lot of criticism because Riot would randomly draw these things behind the scenes. And there is a video of Nick Allen that's like 30 minutes long that they posted to the LoL Esports channel of him just in a room doing this because they were criticized for like not being transparent in the way that they randomly drew this stuff. So then they started doing the draw shows, which I thought was actually great content because then you have this reaction
And
it's
everyone,
dramatic, and
it's
fun.
awesome.
People all watch it, they get their reaction stuff out there. And then they like I don't think that those shows have ever been great either because you had them put 4 balls into another bowl,
Yeah.
and then they would just sort of spin them around and not really randomize them.
So I
And then pull them out, and then they would oftentimes open the bucket or the ball or whatever, and not invisible thing. So it was always sus that way.
Well,
this is new levels.
I feel like this is an attempt to clean up some of the like execution problems of like the spinning the balls around when there's only 2 in there and all that
Yes.
stuff. But I feel like the solution does not look any better.
Like honestly, I've been thinking about this time. So like ways they could do this better that are not as flashy and probably stupid, but also funny that would be better systems. Using random.org, like just loading up
no,
random.org.
I forget. I think it was Spin the wheel, dude. I was talking to Frankie, or maybe it was Yin. I can't remember who suggested it, but someone was saying, or maybe it was even I can't remember, but like just have like an LED wheel, and as teams get eliminated, the pies, the wedges.
You could like tie the player who has to do it to it.
Yeah, and they
like a
spin it,
circus.
and then it's like no whammies, no Korean teams, no big money.
You could do
and
that.
No.
Once going twice.
You could also you could shuffle a deck, like the pro player, whoever like shuffles cards essentially, that like starts pulling them up and revealing the order that they are in. That would be fun. And then the last one I was thinking of is they could do something that's like, you know, the marbles game that people play on stream or whatever. You just put names on all the marble things and then send
Well, I was thinking like an actual like little gotcha lever, which like drops
Yes.
something out, so it's just fully random, and you get your little ball and you pop it open, and like
I mean, they could do a lot of things that are even League of Legends themed, right? Like you could create like the lot. What is it? The lottery or whatever. The balls are all flying around. Like you could create a device that's like that. That's like got Baron heads or something on it. Like you could do some
there's
really
a bunch
kitschy,
of
goofy
teams
stuff.
that are floating around in the air thing. Someone's in there blindfolded trying to grab a piece of paper.
Oh, yeah, okay, maybe not that, but
It feels like it's gone very much from like being like with the ball system. It felt like a game show. It was
Yes.
kind of
Like,
fun.
kinda fun.
And now with an envelope, it's like Oscars kind
but
of
it's
feels
not
like
even
that.
even with the Oscar. Like they're just sticking in front of him out. Like it's so visually stupid, and like you could rig it so easily by just being like look, just pick that one, then that one, then that one. Like it's so goofy. Like I'm just like, what are we doing? Like no offense to the production team or the comp ops team or whoever, but like I don't understand how there was a meeting that was had and this was the solution because it's so
Well, I think
goofy.
what makes it more confusing is it's rather antithetical to whatever because you look at the whole stage. I was speaking to someone from Riot when they were showing me around initially when we got there on the first day, and they were saying like this is the first time we've done like this direct concept for the stage. We've like made it like the London Underground. We've made like the stairs. We've built this whole thing, and it's like why have you put so much effort into the proof of concept for that, but then like you've not really gone with it for the actual draw?
Because Riot loves production more than they love executing the content
Well,
itself.
I mean, I will.
It should be part of the production as well, isn't it?
I mean, so it can be different teams. You never know how things
Yeah,
are broken up.
yeah.
I will say that the stage is sick. There's a lot of great things. It just looks a little goofy. On the actual draw, that's something that I think should be more heavily criticized, more than Odo or like the envelopes. Caller,
envelopes is pretty fucking bad.
this is what Travis feels most important. Fix,
I mean, because-
fix the
okay.
format for the next week, or the 10
because-
minutes of
because
envelopes.
One is a competitive integrity issue. Literally, that like as goofy as the envelopes are, it is like a competitive integrity issue. This draw, as goofy as it is, like yeah, it shouldn't like. There's a better way to create an entertaining product, but I'm not worried about.
All right,
an
let's
integrity
just
issue.
get back to the
Yeah,
tape.
yeah,
For-
okay,
so
it's
for the
fine.
caller, you're saying that MSI is about competition. Can you explain to me why, if you swapped the Mad series with the C9 series, that would somehow lead to less competition? Not in terms of the contestants, but just literally putting those two teams on, flipping those matchups.
So the argument is less that switching those matchups wouldn't be more interesting. Like, yeah, there are more interesting draws. It's just that if you're trying to account for this process in such a way where it's like, all right, we're going beyond regions can't play each other in the first round. We're now going to regions can't play each other in the second round, right? You're creating such a weird, like, draw show with so many stipulations, and you're reducing the number of potential draws where it's like, it's getting significantly less random, and there's no point in that. Like, yeah.
So why is so here's a question that I would love for you to answer. Why is random good? Most tournaments around the world, including most sports, have zero elements of randomness in the creation of their brackets or playoff systems. They are either they're all seed based. They're all based off some equation of things, whether it be regular season or if it's like a tournament series that plays at different points in time, like a fighting game thing. Like they seed them, they don't rely on draws really. Like, so why do you think the randomness is like, if you, like you're saying, this would shrink if you put it so that only one team can be, or one region can be on one side of the bracket? It would reduce the number of potential outcomes, but then you would also arguably just getting rid of the bad ones. so you just get better out. Like, it's less outcomes, true, but they're also just better ones in this situation. So why is randomness inherently considered a good thing to you?
I don't consider randomness inherently good. My take is more along the edges of, people are complaining that we're not going to see like EU versus NA because we're going to see the replays of all the finals in each stage, assuming the favored opponent wins. Mm-hmm. I favor seeding in things like, for instance, CSGO, where the teams would end up seeding themselves for the major and stuff like that. I think that's a better system. However, I think if you had the teams seed themselves, you're going to have more of the same situation can still appear, right? Because, like, let's say China number 1 gets seeded 1 by the teams, and LCA 1 gets seeded 1, and then China 2 gets seeded 3, and Korea 2 gets seeded 4, and whatever. Those NA and EU teams still are going to lose, and depending on which matchup they had, they're going to get thrown down to the lower bracket still and have to face each other.
Yeah, I mean,
again.
Khan was saying, like, if you seeded the tournament, wouldn't it basically look the same? And I'm looking at the bracket right now.
These first round matchups are fine, but if you put T1 where Gen G is, or T1 where Cloud9 is, like, you could say, oh, that's the strong side of the bracket, but you're always going to have, like, roughly a strong and weak side of the bracket. At least the Korean teams would be split up then with the LPL. Like, it's roughly the same. Like, if you just swap the Mad Lions and T1 series with the Cloud9 and BLG series, the overall tournament bracket, like, doesn't really change, and all you do is avoid all these potential. Like, if it goes to chalk and all the Western teams lose to all the Eastern teams, you'll have LPL, LCK in the winner side, and then you'll have EU versus NA in the loser side, which is inherently more interesting matchups than watching series that have all already taken place this year. Right? Like, I would love for you to explain why that's more competitive, because your point is, oh, well, cross-region, I don't care about that. I care about competition. Why is that considered more competitive to watch series that have already happened?
Okay. So, in my opinion, it's more competitive because we have this double elimination bracket in addition to the draw, right? So we're no longer worried about these teams being eliminated right away and getting seeded down to the lower bracket, which is part of the problem, right? So part of the problem with the draw is that, like, let's say if this was Worlds, you'd have LCK, and LPL on one side, right? And then you have that problem again, and then whoever goes to the finals, it's like cross-region play again. But I feel like this problem is much more prominent in the community because we're seeing EU versus EU and NA versus NA in the lower bracket as well, which is not part of the problem. Like, someone's going to win that match, and we're going to see cross-region play afterwards, and it's going to be more competitive because they can climb through the lower bracket potentially. But again, I don't think my take is more focused on the aspect that, like, trying to favor cross-region play so strictly with the group draw and being so upset that it's like we're going to see the finals replayed again is it's more annoying to try to make a process to avoid that, and it's going to make it less, well, obviously there's processes that are good for that, but, like, Riot kind of ignores them.
Well, so I guess I don't understand what your point is, because all the things you're saying can be true with just a better with an extra rule thrown in. One extra rule thrown in completely fixes this problem. It doesn't hurt the competition because you haven't changed the format. There's still that losers bracket to your point. If instead C9 had to beat G2 to move on instead of beat Golden Guardians, who they've already beaten, by the way, just a month ago, I don't see how that's actually more competitive. If anything, I'd argue that's less competitive, that you are not taking on new competition. Like, I don't see how Mad versus GG is like less competitive or less interesting than GG versus C9. I don't think you've demonstrated like a clear reason you think that way.
Setting this aside for a second, I'm very curious. Has anyone done the math on like what the chances of this happening were statistically?
That would be my thing, because I think if it's the case that this is like the worst thing that could have happened, the one thing you didn't want to happen, then his original question doesn't really make much sense, because then your question is centered around there being intent in the bracket being like this, but then we're also acknowledging that this is perhaps a bad version of the bracket. There's there's a jarring nature here between.
It's like you're defending something that was unlikely to have happened anyways. So like, what if this is the unlikely scenario? Why are you defending this scenario? Like, just you just want the potential of bad scenarios.
Yeah. Why are you defending the intent and also defending the randomness of it? It doesn't really make much sense to me. You can't really have both of those.
Regardless, I'd like to know, because I think it'd be fucking hilarious if there was a 2% chance of this happening, and like on Riot's debut of their new format, like the 1 in 50 thing hit.
So there's a couple of rules that came through. One, the tier 1 teams were always going to be on opposite sides of the bracket, and you couldn't have the regions drawing themselves. So already there was some things that were affecting just like pure randomness probabilities. The things that were chosen was it Mad or was it C9 on the side with whichever tier 1 team? So you matched up the tier 1 and tier 2 sides, which was a bit of randomness, and then you drew opponents, which was a bit of randomness. But like, I would have to do the math on how likely it was. It's like pretty significantly non-zero. It wasn't like 1%. I would guess probably around like 10-ish%. So it's something like you should have accounted for realistically happening.
Yeah.
Isn't one of the main things that kind of skews it? Not necessarily skews it. I mean, I'd like to hear what your guys' opinion are, but one of the things that makes it confusing is the fact that tier 1 is tier 3, right?
So that's a different conversation. One that I have felt for a long time is like the fake regional parity. It's like T1 are good enough that they don't need to prove themselves in play-ins like the rest of the tier 3 teams, but they're also not good enough to not be tier 3. And it's like, I think the world finalists and the LCK finalists are probably better than us, and they don't need to prove it. But you also agree they don't need to prove it sometimes, but they need to prove it other times. And
so
like,
where do you think they should be?
I think that they should be in tier 2 if you're gonna like make it relatively evenly.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense to me.
And just throw it C9 in tier 3 and be done with it, off with our heads, so we don't need to debate Mad or C9 in tier 2 or tier 3.
Monjhall, thank you so much for calling in. Anything you want to shout out before we go to the next caller?
Yeah, I'd just like to shout out my wife and newborn daughter, month-old.
Pog,
hey, congratulations.
Thanks, man.
Thanks. And also First Robotics. I can't speak to teams in anyone's region, but if you're a high school student interested in STEM, definitely reach out and look into programs like that. It's really fun to mentor those teams, and there's a lot to learn.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for the very wholesome shout-outs. I'll catch you next time. All right.
Yeah, bye.
I always feel bad whenever we like have a
we just ragged on that guy.
Like,
I'm actually a father recently, by the way.
Yeah, we're very contentious. We're very scrappy on this show, and then they're like, our callers are usually sweethearts.
Dude, that is how they always get their rent. Because Mark, I think, tends to go off on people more than I do, but I think that is how they get their revenge, is because Mark will be like, blah, 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 schooled you. And then at the end, they're like, I'd like to just give a shout out to every person going through anything in the world ever.
It's like, I'd like to give a shout out to my cat who's currently in the hospital right now.
Or they'll often be like, and by the way, just a huge fan of you guys. Like, I've listened to your content for so long. And Mark just looks like the biggest jerk in the world.
Yeah, I've actually got every one of your interviews or every one of your content on VHS, Mark. So
Well, I saw on VHS. Were you illegally recording it off the TV?
Listen, in the UK, they haven't caught up. Okay, that's what Jake's got over here. He's got VHS. Okay.
I think you can go either Gabe or anyone else.
Well, really quickly, thank you to a bunch of people who I've missed. Perchy99, 30 months, Messerix. Puprup gifted 5 subs. I don't know if you're still around, Puprup, but thank you. Bronze Star, Flame Top, Lol's Beer Nut for the 1,000 bits. D9 Bartlett, Big Angry Hobo, Shared Mellow Jello, Disco Shell, Bigger Frog, Papayor, Gotcha J, Chartius, NV187, Zerthon, and DFitch. Thank you all for the subs. We're going to grab Gabe. Hello, Gabe. Welcome to the show.
Big G.
I don't know what that was. Thank you. Welcome to the show. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Riverside, California.
Riverside, California.
Were you not there when Dracos and I were explaining how we want to cast
Yes.
together?
Yeah.
That's
But I
just
didn't know if
it's
that's
just like
what it
I'm
was.
just getting
Yeah,
into
yeah.
being a hype man in
Yes.
general.
Yes.
Like you'll host and I'll just start yelling shit.
Yeah. All right. So Riverside, California. What do you want to talk about on the show?
I want to talk about how the West has a good chance to beat the Eastern teams, especially Cloud9 and G2.
Well, the West has a good chance to beat the Eastern teams, especially Cloud9 and G2. So not especially these LEC scrubs. Especially, don't let Yamato Cannon hear that. You say that. Anyway, why do you think that?
So I think the draw was, of course, the worst draw we could have had. Possibly, it is what it is. But
Do you
I
mean
think,
we? You mean North America or just fans?
Well, he said
Oh,
G2,
no,
not
I-
GG.
Oh, I thought you said GG. Sorry. go
No.
ahead.
Could you
Oh
turn
no,
it
I
up
said
slightly?
G2.
Sorry.
No, so
Continue.
yeah, the draw was probably the worst thing that happened to us, which is it is what it is. But I think G2 with their drafts like Pantheon top and Darius top in Nautilus mid, I think with the unique drafts they could maybe beat Gen G. And when it comes to Cloud9, I think stylistically, I think they can head on take on these Eastern teams when it comes to laning. I really do believe it. I mean, I'm a big believer, but I really think that these two teams especially they could take a series from anybody, I feel like. But it's just about being competitive and you just have to be a believer, in my opinion.
So I will be right there with you on the C9 stuff. I thought it was interesting that so many people were immediately like, well, we know exactly what the next round is going to look like, et cetera, because Golden Guardians was able to take a game off Billy Gaming. I know people are going to be like, oh, but that was because they were throwing. But, I don't know, whatever. They could throw again. It shows that they're not consistent. They're not as dominant to be able to just 2-0 fucking Golden Guardians. And then C9 is the best performing North American team that has ever existed when it comes to international events. They always upset, or they don't always. They are the team that upsets from North America, and this seems like the prime type of example where that could happen. And I'm not saying that even they're favored, but I think it is much, much, much closer than people are expecting.
Yeah, I think as much as we've been hooting and hollering about the format here, it's like non-negligible chance that something doesn't go to chalk. It feels like it's pretty likely or pretty common that something gets upset, whether that's FPX dying to C9 randomly in 2021. These things can happen. LPL always has, it feels like a seed do something kind of troll. So it's very possible for C9 to win. I feel like I agree that BLG should be favored, but when you're predicting a general upset across 4 series, you're saying, okay, that one's a 10% chance, and this one's a 6% chance, and GG's a 1% chance. You add all them up, and you suddenly are at 25% chance that something doesn't go right. You can't. It's hard to predict exactly which one, whether that be G2 or C9. I feel like there's a reason that people are very optimistic about G2. Caps is the guy who is the most important player during that period of time when G2 was kind of the magical EU hope team. He's the greatest Western player of all time. There's all these reasons to have more confidence in G2 pulling off an upset. Generally, I do think they have the tougher opponent. I think Cloud9, if that is truly BLG's level, which I don't actually think it is, I think they played down to their level of competition. I think they were taking it pretty easy, whatever you want to call it. But if that is BLG's level that they're going to be playing at this tournament, I think it's very possible for C9 to beat that because C9 mostly shit on NA. They crapped on GG in that series. I mean, game 1, GG got a lead and through. Game 2, GG got a lead in 1. And I was like, whoa, we might have a series on here for our finals. And the next 2 games, C9 was like, those were aberrations. Bam. And they beat the hell out of Golden Guardians and it showed that they were significantly better. So, if BLG's getting a little loosey-goosey with Golden Guardians, that does bode well for C9, excuse me.
Jake, you want to hop in here?
So I have a problem with people just immediately counting Mad Lions out of the race, I think. And when we talk about the Western teams, I think that It's weird. Like they obviously won LEC. They're coming in as our first seed. I feel like there's a weird thing where people always. I think G2 have like very high ceiling, and we associate them with a certain like level internationally, which I think is why, no matter the fact that they finish fourth in this split, we still assume that they will pick up the pace or whatever. But I don't think that. I think the Mad Lions will reach fine form by this tournament, and I think people are going to be very surprised by the way that they play.
Who is more likely to get through in the winners part, Mad Lions or G2, in your opinion?
So remind me, it's G2 plays Gen G, right?
Yep, man.
And
Yes.
then Mad plays T1.
Yes.
I need to think about that stylistically. We have. I don't think either of them are going to make it through those series.
Yeah, but you were just hyping up Mad
No,
Lions.
but like, so I think when it comes to the lower bracket, like, I wouldn't be surprised. If,
right,
like,
right. But
yeah.
we're not talking about
We're
that.
talking
Yeah,
about round
sure.
one upset.
Sure,
Yes.
That's
right.
gonna happen in the next 4 days.
No, I think both of these series. I think the Gen G G2 series is 3-1 Gen G, and I think the Mad Lions T1 series is like weirdly just because of the way that I think that series will play out. I think that's going to be a 3-0.
So you disagree with the caller then that this is a thing, and I assume you're worried about C9.
No, I think C9 GG. I think both of these series are 3-0s.
Okay, so
for the Asian.
so
for the
we're to
Chinese
see
teams.
4 3-0s.
No, I think Mad Lions. I think G2 Gen G will be 3-1,
Oh, okay, sorry.
and I
Okay.
think the other 3 series will be 3-0s.
Okay,
Maybe Mad
Other
Lions.
two
Maybe
series.
Mad Lions T1 is a 3-1, but
Gotcha.
I think
Oh,
for sure the NA teams will. I think are both going to get 3-0'd.
okay.
Hater. Dirty
Here he is, the goddamn.
Thanks for joining us,
Europeans.
dude. Catch
Yeah.
you later.
I love you guys. You know, like I'm a big fan of America.
Yeah. You're really showing it when it comes time to predict the games. I don't know why people count out these NA teams, but they're definitely both getting 3-0'd immediately. And then they'll probably both find a way to lose their direct head-to-head matchup and both just go home
Yeah.
and seed that entire side of the losers bracket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
dude? I think C9. I feel like C9 is going to do something really interesting. They're good.
Yes, they could.
Like I don't know. I feel like it's going to be this whole thing where it doesn't go the way we thought it was going to go, and then Riot's going to be like, "Oh, you guys thought we had a bad format and bad seating and everything, and then look, it just worked out fine." And they'll be like, "Oh, thank God that was close."
Secretly sweating, but like, see, this is why we don't jump to conclusions.
yeah, exactly.
I have a little bit of confidence in C9. I've heard. No, I shouldn't say behind the scenes stuff because
Mark's
People-
heard some stuff.
well, people always assume that like people always like scrims are going all right, and they're like that must mean it's a 50% win
Yeah.
rate, and it's like, well, I think of the quote of what Core JJ said when Pioshik joined Team Liquid. I think it was Core who had said this in an interview, but like Pioshik joined Team Liquid, they boot camped in Korea, and they were still losing mostly to Korean teams, but Core JJ was like, hey guys, we're doing pretty good. It's like a 33% win rate, and Pioshik's like, this is good for you guys? Like, this feels terrible. And they're like, you should see the other years. And so, like, there's a bit of that going on when I say that, like, I've heard some decent stuff about scrims. But, like, yeah.
I want to touch on something that I think will play into the rest of the tournament. So this is a behind-the-scenes thing as well, being, like, on the side of doing interviews. Do you know that so you'll know this from being in the media room. So where they make us sit outside as you go into the interview room is there's basically just, like it would be for like a hockey sub bench is just like 7 steel chairs where the players sit. So you get like, so when G2 and Gen G play each other, like they'll all be, we had it already. It was when R7 played BLG. It was Bin and Bong both sitting next to each other. And it was the most funny thing. I wish I took a photo of it because they were just like, Bong had just been absolutely clapped, like defeated in the tournament. And they're just sitting next to each other. They make them sit next to each other. So I wonder if that's going to have a psychological effect throughout the tournament, making these people interact with each other. I wonder if
That
anyone will bring
happens
mind
at every
games to it.
tournament. I know this is your first international one, but that's always that's kind of the weird thing behind the scenes where they all end up next to each other.
Yeah.
The funniest part is when I will be doing interviews out in front of the LCS,
Yeah.
and I'll be interviewing somebody who just like stomped the team, and I'll be interviewing him and asking him like, oh yeah, what was it like? He's like, oh yeah, those guys, they were not good, they're whatever, and then the whole team comes out and walks behind the interview as it's happening.
The best interviews you get are also when like there's some internal controversy and you get the interview with like the losing player coming out and he's like, yeah, I don't know what my jungler was doing.
yeah. But anyway, back to the question at hand. Mark, you talked on C9 a little bit. Anything you want to say about G2 and Gen G?
No, I feel like the G2 stuff is like, this sounds insulting maybe to say, but I feel like it's less like grounded in like reality and more about like history. Whereas, like, I can point out the things that Yagao did very poorly this play-ins that makes me think Eminez will do better, or roughly the same as what Gory was able to do in that series. I can say that Fudge historically has done much better than Licorice, and, like, Licorice did okay into Bin, didn't stomp him in lane, but survived it just fine, wasn't getting solo killed. Berserker and Sven should be better than... Like, I can list the reasons, whereas, like, for Gen G versus G2... yeah, Broken Blade was smurfing this tournament, and Doran is usually not the main carry out of them. He had a very good finals versus Zeus, but Zeus is a bit of a choker, apparently. He seems to always perform slightly worse in these really big games. I think Payas is great, but he's a rookie, and you can talk about Mickey and Hans both being able to play traditional matchups very well, but having their unique things like the Draven, and, like, if Mickey wants to bust some crazy stuff out. There's another angle there that you can maybe get a surprise on Pays and Delight. Chovy's crazy, but sometimes people call him a choker internationally too, even though I just think he plays hard matchups. But he doesn't roam a ton. He's like more lane focused, and like Caps this tournament recently has been like turbo laner. And so like there's all these things you can kind of tell yourself, but I feel like it's more about like reclaiming the G2 magic, because it's almost like that saying, better to keep your mouth closed and be thought a fool than open your mouth and prove everyone correct.
Yeah.
That's kind of what BLG did in plays. Was they kind of opened their mouths and made everyone be like, wait a minute, are you frauds? Whereas Gen G is just coming in as LCK champions. You assume they're fucking amazing, and they are, but like you haven't seen anything to throw that out of question yet. Whereas I feel like BLG gave you reasons to question them a little bit, even if I don't actually believe in them.
So like that's what the number one thing for me when like I think. So like, I've obviously said now, and I have to go. So, sorry.
Make sure the mic's up near your mouth too, and you have to follow it along.
Yeah,
Otherwise
cool,
you can't
cool.
hear you.
So like, I'm immediately like, I think I'm gonna be right, and like obviously I'll hold my hands up completely as a complete fraud. You heard it here first. If they don't end up 3-0ing and it ends up being a C9 series, that they come away with either a 5-game series and end up winning it. But like, I feel like a lot of people, the only reason why we're even like pulling into question that that's going to be a series that C9 like has a really chance in is because had like a fraud litmus test in the play-ins. I feel like BLG is.
No,
like,
it's also because C9's been amazing historically.
Yeah, but like, do you not think
internationally for North America, from a North
100%.
American perspective?
Yeah, but
Mark is.
But that's the same thing as the G2 thing, which I'm saying
Yeah.
is like seated in history. It's like, yes, they have at points been the ones to be the like superstars for NA, but like C9, when was the last time they did that? And you can't say 2021 getting out of groups just because fucking FPX exploded. Like, don't get me wrong, it was nice that they won the tiebreaker game against Rogue, I think it was, but like,
They went undefeated when they qualified for MSI 2020. All right, Mark. I just defeated Mark Silverman. All right. Anyway, thank you so much, caller. Anything you want to shout out?
Yeah, I'd just like to shout out you guys, of course. Thank you for doing this. We love watching this, especially I'm about to go to school, so it's nice to have this. And then shout out to your Alienware and OnePlus. Thanks to them, everything's possible. Grateful for everything they do for the show. And of course, shout out to my beautiful girlfriend Kaylee. I love you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the call, and we'll catch you next time.
See you guys. Take care.
All right. We're going to take a quick break right now to talk about OnePlus. So I have right here in front of me, I went too far away from the camera, the OnePlus 11, which is available now. You can go get this, and you should. It is amazing. So I have some stats that I'm going to pull up here on my OnePlus that I sent to myself ahead of time, which I cannot find now because it's not connected to the Wi-Fi. Let me go through and connect to the Wi-Fi.
Oh my god, now you have to sign in. Why didn't you just use data?
All right, here we go. We're getting the connection right now. It's connected up. So either way, this is the OnePlus 11, which comes with up to 16 gigabytes of RAM, which means you can have up to 40 apps open without worrying about your apps dying. You can charge your phone to 100% in less than half an hour with 80-watt SuperVOOC. It's got next-gen Cryo Velocity VC cooling system, which keeps your phone cool even while gaming. A third-generation Hasselblad camera, Hasselblad, and then a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. This is awesome. Thank you so much to OnePlus for sending this. for me. We're going to be doing some live streams using this later on. I think probably next week is when we're doing it, but we're going to be doing some live streams from the event, which will be really fun. Worked with OnePlus on making that stuff set up. So we'll actually be using this for content creation. So thank you so much to OnePlus for sponsoring my MSI coverage and sending me this phone. We're going to be giving away one of these to you. One of you, not all of you. One of you will get one of these. So stay tuned for that. I'm still working with Numi a little bit on how we want to handle that giveaway, but we'll have details on that soon, as well as the giveaway. OnePlus gave us a bunch of tickets to give away for the final 2 days of MSI. So if you don't have a ticket, you want to go to MSI, stay tuned for the giveaway we're going to be doing there. So, yep, Numi is linking the OnePlus phone, the 11, in the chat right now. And if you're watching the VOD, you can go check out the link in the description as well. But thank you to OnePlus for sponsoring the show. All right. We're going to get into the next caller. Who do you want?
Pick it. You pick.
Hello, Mockra. Welcome to the show. Where are you calling from, Mockra? I'm giving you time to unmute. There we go.
Thanks. Calling from Sacramento, California.
Sacramento, California. What do you want to talk about on the show?
Holy shit. Oh, wait, no. It's not.
What?
So
Mark didn't do time zones right for a second. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Oh. So I want to call it. My take was essentially that Western analysts are ruining international viewership for fans. I think, Travis, you've done a pretty good job of maybe discounting this take a little bit in this show, but I think my general thought is it feels like on The Dive or other shows that are geared more towards like a North American audience or a Western audience, analysts are more interested in being right as opposed to, maybe giving fans a, hope or something to look forward to at these events, which I think can kind of make it seem like you listen to The Dive and then you've kind of lost interest in this week's matches, which I think is, again, what is the role of a LCS caster / analyst? Is it to be right, or is it to provide an entertainment product to fans?
All right, before Mark pops up.
Well, I was just going to say.
Go ahead.
No, you do your thing.
No.
I was just going to say that, like, there might be a hint what our role is in our title. You'll notice it says analyst and not hype man.
I think the pushback I'd have there is that you're not a team analyst, you're an LCS analyst. And I think, again, it's a little bit, I think, in terms of titles, but like ultimately I think you serve an entertainment purpose and, especially for the region that you're, working in.
Okay, so before Mark starts dismantling you, he's raging right now. He's foaming at the mouth. Hold it back, Jake. So what? Okay, give me an idea of what you'd want them to do instead. Like,
and when you say hype up, I think what Travis means is like give the specifics of like give a sample sentence of like what an hour-long podcast of hyping up North America versus the LPL would sound like in your mind. Just like some sample.
Well, I don't. That I was not.
Stop trying to get him to do your job.
I was not specifically asking about sentence, but
okay, sorry.
High level. First off, start at high level. High level. What would you like to see them do as an example?
Yeah, so a little bit hard to come up with exact specifics, but I think an example would be like the Golden Guardians versus BLG game. Maybe talking a little bit more about how Golden Guardians was able to come back, and I think that it was game 2. Talking a little bit more about their strengths as a team. I think on the underlying thing, it can be, we expect LPL to win this match, 3-1 or whatever it is. But, a lot of the region or a lot of the conversation leading up to it could focus more on the strengths of Golden Guardians or the strengths of C9 or G2. I think Europe does a pretty good job of this. Like if you look at like how Europe's chances in the last few international events, they haven't had the best showing. But if you look at like a lot of like the European casters, I think this is mostly specific to G2 and they haven't done a great job of it with Mad, but they'll talk about, G2 kind of, coming up with surprise picks or, being able to take games off of anybody and, kind of giving that thread of hope. I think if you look at just I think it was the last call, I'm currently working, so I'm not paying 100% attention, but I think Travis, you had some good points about C9 being the strongest NA team. And, if Licorice looked really good against Ben, then, what's Fudge going to look like? And I think there's threads that you can focus on more of, here's hope or here's something to look for, or, here's the strengths of these teams, and less so of a, LOL NA, they're going to get 3-0'd kind of thing. Since again, like if I'm listening to Hotline League or the Dive as a Western fan, I want a reason to tune into the matches. And, maybe your job as an analyst and you want to be correct. But I think at the end of the day, if you're on this type of content, you should be looking for, how do I get fans engaged with MSI or with, their region or the representatives? And, I think there's better ways to do that.
Did you watch the LOL esports? They were like 2 minutes long, but like the LOL esports hype pieces that they came out with, like deep fried Izzdaer as the thumbnail. Like it was
No,
There was a series of them where basically every region they had
their
thing.
Casters
Yeah.
or like personalities in the region.
Quick Shot was like the LEC has been built for the future and stuff like that. They all had like a hype thing for each region.
Sounds like you didn't get
Gotcha.
to catch those. I will say there is some of that stuff that exists which like kind of ignores reality and you just say things that sound good. And like I know what you're saying about like you can focus more on things Golden Guardians do well. The problem is with the way League of Legends plays is it's a zero-sum game, which means for every advantage that someone is getting, the other person is losing almost always. It's not like basketball where you have like two hot shooters like both hitting threes and like who's going to win the shootout? Like there's not really shootouts. Like there's very situationally times where like both AD carries are fed and like they're melting each other's front lines, like who can play better. But in reality, especially in not very close series, which these are expected to be, when you like I can talk about how 6A can play Lucian Nami and actually be like pretty good at it for like NA standards. And like I actually really like their Lucian Nami and I hope they play it a lot. But like they're going to play it against, potentially Ruler, and I'm like, they're not going to get leads. And then if I tell you they can play Lucian Nami and get leads and it doesn't happen, then I lied to you. Because that's how League of Legends plays. And like at the end of the day, the analysis wanting to be correct means that we're not lying. And you can get lied to, but then what we've seen historically is if you lie about what's going to happen, one, people don't like you and don't trust you in the future, and two, they get mad when that thing doesn't happen that you assume the player fucked up. Like, oh, this Stixay should have won because he's a great Lucian Nami, and then they picked it and they lost the lane to fucking Ruler. It's like, well, I shouldn't have probably told you that like Stixay was gonna win the lane. Like and maybe he does, and then it's super fucking sick when it happens. But like I always would rather paint the realistic picture, so if the upset does happen, you're even more excited and you get to like rub it in all of our faces that we're dum-dums.
I'm not a massive fan of just the idea that like Western analysts as if like the talent team exists in some sort of monolithic expression, because I feel like there's a lot of variance in that, because what you're talking about there is a distinct difference between like committal to a kayfabe, where because if I'm a Western analyst and I want to like truly sit here and be like NA is going to win Worlds, G2 is going to, I'm committing to a bit at that point. Do you know what I mean? Like to be realistic, it's a persona, and we've seen that done before. Like remember like way back in the day, like Monte Cristo, like he wasn't doing it for like, that was a realistic bit, but do you know what I mean? Like the choo-choo train.
Yeah, you become like the avatar of the.
You become an avatar. It's a kayfabe. It's like a WWE thing, like for sure. And if like that's a whole different thing, that's an entertainment value. But then you need to balance that with an element of like you've got that guy on the desk and you've got the other guy that brings him down. Like, do you know what I mean? In terms of like realism versus intense delusional optimism. I think that's where a good balance on the broadcast comes from. Is his point more so that like independent outlets like this show or like the dive for you or whatever?
I mean, the dive isn't independent. I think his
independent, but external to the broadcast.
I think if I had to guess, what Mokra's saying is, you work for the LCS. Yeah. You want fans excited about the LCS. You should make a case for why they should be excited, as opposed to just saying all the ways that they're going to lose. And I do think there's some fairness to that in saying that you can go harder on the things that these teams do well. The problem is, Diaphoria in particular is an international show. It goes out on LoL Esports, which has European casters on it as well. So it's not just for LCS fans, but I understand.
Mokra's point was the West, right?
Yeah,
so that's
yeah.
still
it includes EU fans too.
Yeah, Mockra, you were going to say something.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, a lot of this comes from tuning into the dive and mostly just catching the games through VODs. So a lot of the way that you kind of interact with the content is you'll catch the highlights or VODs, and then you go to listen to the dive or something. And so listening to the dive prior to like the Golden Guardian series, wasn't giving you a lot of hope about those teams. And then I think the most recent one, I'm like a quarter of the way through it, but kind of starting out with kind of discounting the Western teams. Again, I think the European analysts do a little bit better job of this. But again, it's the kind of thing of like, if I'm tuning into an NA podcast, like I listen to the dive, it specifically covers LCS most of the year. And if I go to tune into the dive during an international event, I'm given very little reason to want to watch that international event. And I think it's less of a, not looking for lying, but more looking for reasons to watch MSI. And I feel like the podcast has done a poor job of that, and has historically done a poor job of that with international events in general.
So here's one thing. This is a little broader mockra than what you're talking about, but I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying in the previous call. I think one fair argument is it feels really bad when we have 4 days of games coming up, and after the draw show, everyone was basically like, every analyst, every personality was like, "Oh man, now we're gonna have to deal with all these domestic matchups," like basically being like the next 4 days are already decided, nothing matters, like we know what's going to happen and like what these matchups are going to be looking like. And I totally get that you don't want to be disingenuous and be like, who knows what's going to happen, like this format could be anything. But it also, I can understand how much it is very like shitty to basically start off the main bracket stage of the tournament being like, and here's 4 days of busy work to get us to the next shitty round that we've decided is going to be all regional matchups,
Yeah, I think we're all pretty reactionary. We all say something like, this is 100% doom and gloom, and then like something else happens and it's fine. Like that's definitely happened in the life cycle of Woolly Souls before. On the dive in particular, I think a lot of analysts, like at least I can speak for myself, but I assume it's true for people like Vetis, Kobe, Izzdaer, Dracos, like K-Droll, like we all like I think all of us have some like epistemological drive to like represent reality in a way that we find truthful. Like we are not hype men. We don't like, this is our real opinions. These are our real thoughts. We're not here like, and you can make the case again to the caller that like, hey, you're serving a product, and that's a complete reframing of what this show would be, because the way the dive is done is it's a podcast where the LCS talent speak at length about their honest thoughts of situations for the most part. And like
for the most part,
there's some things that we can't due to company ties can't be 100% honest on, but like on things like analysis, you can basically be 100% honest on. And there are people who appreciate that and want that. And there's like LCK fans who speak English who listen to the podcast and stuff like that, or teams. People are fans of multiple regions. It's not like an LCS fan only watches LCS. I know there are some who watch other regions. And like you could spend time gassing up what Golden Guardians does well, but then you still need to spend time contrasting that against what the LCK rep is going to do, or LPL in this case with JDG. So like, and even then, I don't think we even really talked much about JDG in that series and like all in that show, everything they do well. But like, yeah, I think there's a point to be made that like we can do a better job being positive on our representatives and not just be like, oh no, 3-0 incoming, we're doomed, we lost the draw show.
Yeah, I think I would be really interested to know, because I saw Quickshot had tweeted out a really wonderful screenshot of a post that somebody made on Reddit about how these wildcard matches and play-ins actually mean a lot to wildcard regions. And I think it would be very interesting to know what like the Brazilian analysts, how they approach this, right? Like, are they? It would be interesting to know if they're like, yeah, we're gonna get stomped, but I can't wait to see my favorite players face off against these like gods of the Rift, or like, is there a world where people could be like, yeah, Golden Guardians, their chances are slim to none, but how cool is it that we get to see Golden Guardians play against JDG after in a world where we never even thought that these guys could potentially even make playoffs in North America.
Yep.
And so maybe there's an argument to be had there where like you should be celebrating the opportunity even if the reality is not there.
Do you think this is perhaps emblematic in any way that people are less so fans of teams nowadays, more so fans of the region? Because for me, when I look at the loud fans, for example, you talk about the Brazilian fans, it feels like, yes, they're in a nationalistic pride kind of way, but they're also massive loud fans. They've got the jerseys. They've either got a loud jersey on or they've got the Brazilian football jersey on. And for them, they've flown all the way from Brazil, probably spent a load of money. They probably, to be realistic, like they probably didn't think they were going to make it much further. They didn't think they were going to make it out of the play-in stage. So for them, it's like it comes from purely being a fan of your team, no? Whereas with NA, it feels almost like it's less so about the teams, more so about the regions. So that kind of dilutes.
And I think there's not you in particular, caller, but there is a non-negligible portion of self-loathing within North America from fans and people who are not happy with the region as a whole. And like don't have that whole like, well, we're just gonna show up and have a good time.
Yeah.
Because when they fail, like maybe I'm not saying you're a part of this, but there's like people on Reddit who are like, how do we fix NA? Fuck these guys, these paycheck stealing bum ass.
Yeah, or vindication in the like back when Team Liquid used to be here. Oh, you spent all this money, you won't run North American talent, and then you lose or something like that. So I agree that there is some aspect of that.
There's
as
something
well.
within the entire ecosystem, I guess is what I'm saying, that like stops that kind of minor region underdog, but let's believe in ourselves mentality from like, I don't think there's as big of a market for it, even if you are someone who would appreciate that.
It's hard to run the like Mighty Ducks narrative when there is so much like money and stuff like this going into it. Because you guys aren't actually underdogs realistically. Like
somewhat. I mean, we are from a competitive level, but we don't quite have the like.
Yeah.
I just don't think there's like.
It's hard to call you the little guy. Is my point.
If I just went on this like performative more like, and again, not being fully like false face here, but like, you know, I just don't think that would actually play as well in North America as it might for a Brazil or some other minor regions.
Mask Swan in the chat, who's done a bunch of LJL stuff, has said, as someone who did this for 3 years, we sell hopium, but realistic hopium.
Yeah.
I'd just be very curious what that looks like.
Well, and I'm saying like, I feel like, and I could be wrong, and it's hard to know where it comes from, but like there's a lot more pride from Brazilian fans, not just in League of Legends, but like culturally for their teams. So like you can sell realistic hopium easier, I think, than you can sell to a potentially cynical North American fan.
100%, because I mean the difference between them, and it's just something I should have included as a caveat to my point, is like for them it's like it's the delusional like fan. Like if you look at like the whole thing with did you see the recent thing where it's like just like every post is a Brazilian fan with like the Tin Owns thing, like this post is irrelevant. Yeah, like that's just like
the Rob's Day stuff.
Yeah, it's just like it's literally like, you know, Real Madrid fans, Barcelona fans, like that's how they treat it. Like it's just pure like football mentality, which doesn't really exist in a lot of like NA. I don't think NA. I feel like NA and EU have this weird thing. So in EU we have this with France, like Carmine Corp, like they have like they have like really like football ultra mentality. It feels almost in a lot of other countries like we think we're too cool to do that. Like it's obsessive, it's stalkery, it's creepy. And I feel like I'd like to see a lot more NA fans like get behind your team in like not a delusional way, but like just be proud to be from America.
Yeah, we have a crew called Name Men.
The NA men need to carry this mentality.
Yeah, we have a crew of people that have been doing that for a while, and but they're small and they're derided at times for having that passion, you know. So yeah, all right. Thank you so much, caller, for reaching out. Mockra, anything you want to say before we say goodbye?
No, I think well said, and yeah, I think in terms of shout outs, just shout out Alienware using I forget the number, but the 34-inch ultra wide OLED, and it's fantastic. So,
yeah, I absolutely. I use that at home.
Thanks for having me.
And I absolutely love it. Thank you so much, Mockra, for the call. We'll catch you next time.
Also, probably worth just shouting out NA Men Discord or whatever. If you are someone who wants the more positive side of the NA ecosystem and doesn't want like,
yeah, it's all Care Bears over there.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I admit I am someone who's cynical and on the like, well, here's the problems with NA. Let me walk you through all of them right now. Versus being like, you know, just like, well, we're just gonna focus on the good stuff.
Yeah.
I
mean, I think there's also the Name Men people. I don't want to put words in their mouth or anything like that, but I think one thing that they have done a pretty good job of is just being excited for the players.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, it's so cool that like Licorice is gonna go and play this game, and I hope the best for him, and blah 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 blah. And it's
look at his curls, his hair's so cool, you know, like.
Well, it's less about like the rah rah we're gonna stomp or we're gonna get stomped or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's more just like I'm happy for the players that they get to do this, and I really want to see them do well, and hopefully things go well. You know,
I think
it's like a parent almost.
I think there's some really cool things coming out of NA storyline wise. I think the whole like upset Cinderella story of Golden Guardians. Like,
I don't think it's been the Golden Guardian stuff. I don't think has been served well by the. I don't think it's been hyped as much as we all could have done.
I think everyone, yeah, to me it feels like that. I feel like everyone's just like, it feels like everyone is acknowledging silently how amazing it is and not being overt with it. But I think even beyond that, there's some like stories like I feel like the LCS broadcast was a little bit reticent to, maybe not reticent's not the right word, but like hesitant maybe to pick up on a lot more of the M&S narrative. Bear in mind I don't watch like a massive amount of LCS, but like for him, like he's a player that like played 2 splits in my ERL actually, where XL's academy team not there anymore, but they used to be at the time. So he played 2 splits there. I think the story with him is he was like picked by either AI or like a data, like an analytics program, like detected like the best mid laner they could have gotten, and they brought him in, and he had like 2 like complete.
We've talked a little bit about it with Blabber having conversations with him and stuff. So
we did cover the M&S story a fair amount.
Yeah,
it's not. We haven't. I think it's kind of died off. It'll be interesting to see how they approach it.
I guess also what I'm saying is in terms of he had like 2 very like world beater splits that kind of just ended in complete disasters, and for him to go from that to like getting kicked from JDXL. To get kicked from JDXL, to then have all these like auspicious doubts around you about like your work ethic and like how you work in a team environment, to then go with that and it'd be like a thing of like, this guy's never going to work in a tier 1 or we're going to do well. And then for him to move to C9 and like get that move, replace someone else obviously as well, and then consistently perform all the way up until making it to Worlds, I think that's something that like really needs to be celebrated. Like that's a story of, I can't speak to how much about like what's going behind the scenes there, but at least if that continues up, that's a story about a man conquering his personal demons in some way, and I think that should be celebrated a lot more.
Well, and Mark and I went to M&S today.
Yeah,
at the mall.
You're a loser. Go get the last caller.
There's a store called M&S in the UK.
You're talking about Marks and Spencer's.
Is that what it's called? Marks and Spencer's?
Mark Z and Spencer's.
Oh, okay.
You can be Spencer's.
Okay, great. Mark wouldn't even honor that with a microphone in your direction.
I'm just gonna.
Izzdaer is here. Izzdaer, welcome to the show. Where are you calling from?
London, England, next to an M&S.
Oh!
Representing, man.
Marks and Spencer's. London, England. Glad we had somebody call in from locally. What do you want to talk about on the show?
So my take is that the MSI broadcast has already done a better job of creating team and player storylines, including for Golden Guardians, than the LCS broadcast does domestically.
And we were just talking about this. Okay.
Hit us.
So go ahead. Why do you think this is the case?
So I don't know if it's something that's brought over from EU, because even though I'm in London, I watch NA, but I feel like we're at an international tournament where we've brought in a load of teams that most of us don't watch all the times, and I've already been introduced to better storylines and feel more connected to the players and how they play and the stories that brought them here than I do about half the teams in the NALCS when I'm watching. I feel like I've actually sort of understood where some of these teams are going and gotten really attached to them over the course of just the playing stage more than I usually do.
Why do you think that it like where can you give examples of where you're seeing this versus where it's like
like a segment or something that like stood out to you?
Yes. So like specifically like tying in the PSG narratives to how Golden Guardians obviously have 2 players that used to play on them. Like I've never watched any LLL, but watching Loud and tying in how passionate their fans are, and then talking about the players and things, like even though there's games where these teams are super underdogs, I'm still understanding of these teams. They're not hyper focusing on the teams that are just going to destroy them. They're not hyper focusing on BLG.
Sorry to cut you off there. I feel like I cut your momentum there, but like I super agree with this. I feel like watching the broadcast and like even just being, it might be helped by the fact that this is like this is the first league event I've been to, but like I feel like the broadcast has done a really, really good job. And I think this goes back to like a lot of like, I think Gorborg did a tweet where he like was getting a lot of praise for doing one of the best, I think it was analysts on Vietnam, right? And like I feel like there's just a real push in this playing stage for like one of the first times in a while that I've seen where it's just like it feels like all the narrative is very much like beyond the surface level of the game, and we actually have reasons to care about these teams, and I think that's really, really important.
My suspicion as it relates to Golden Guardians is that in the LCS and in every regional league, I think the production and broadcast teams make bets on teams. And I don't, I know this may be Mark's area. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But I think it's like, where are we going to invest the most of our resources? You're going to probably invest into like
insider trading.
No. Really gambling, no. But it's like you don't expect Golden Guardians to go this far. And so you don't spend a bunch of time on them until they start doing really well. And they had that big win streak, and I think they spent a lot of time talking about Stixxay's resurgence and Licorice. Well, even then, I think he wasn't as flashy as he is right now. But still, like, there was a lot of that conversation at the time, and then it kind of died off, and then it came back for playoffs. And so I think going into this international event, Golden Guardians is here. They've made it. You can invest into them as a narrative and as a team. And I think that opportunity is not always there in the LCS because you have to choose which some of these 10 teams, and spending much time talking about a team that you don't expect to do well is not going to do it. I don't know if you think I'm off base here, Mark.
No, I think there's an element of truth to that where you have to call your shots, and like suddenly you have Core JJ in your Worlds music video, despite the fact that he didn't make Worlds, for example. Like
Yes.
that's what Travis is talking about in terms of like you have to kind of guess who you're going to invest in for longer term projects, and like you want to be telling the stories for teams that are going to be going further in this kind of stuff. I will say, as someone who works on both, and I'm sorry to disagree, but I don't think that there's anything like the Goldberg one, for example.
Yeah.
That was great. Like that was an incredible story that he found and told that.
Sure.
But in terms of like method of delivery, he just told us, and like he wanted to do more with it. I was with him when he initially told me this story. I was like, that's great. We should like try and find Kiaya and like get pictures of his childhood if we can, and like really tell a beautiful story.
So what's the next step then?
Well, because we didn't have the resources and the time and some of the things that Travis was talking about, like, yeah, we just like Goldberg just set it on the desk, and like he did a great job telling the story. But I think like in terms of
show don't tell type deal.
Yeah, show don't tell. Give it resources, give it investment to actually tell a great story. And I think what the caller is feeling in a lot of ways is like there's a lot of news stories.
100%.
Because I'm sure, caller, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you've probably heard that this is Stixxay's first MSI in 7 years. And you've probably heard that he was all the way down to the coaching position for his academy team before he came back in as a sub. And like a lot of
who he
played together 7 years ago as a mid laner, and he went to 4 titles or 4 championships in a row. And like, did you guys know Licorice used to do that? Like, I feel like a lot of it could be that these are storylines because you don't follow these regions and you don't follow these teams, and it's the first time you're hearing the Kiaya story. It fucking hits you. Yeah. Versus like if you followed Golden Guardians for the last like 9 weeks, or like for certain players like Blabber, who's been on the top of the LCS for like, we've told his story a lot of times, and there's this question of like how much should we rehit it, and like when do you rehit it, and like these kinds of things. So like I do think part of it is just newness.
I think my main point is, and I think where we agreed, but there's a slight disconnect here, is that I don't think that we've optimized that completely. I think there's still a lot more work to do, but I think compared to where it was for a lot of international events, where I felt like it was, you get talent in from specific regions like EU. The EU casters are very good at telling the EU stories, and then sometimes you'd have crossover. Like for example, Nymira would be really good at telling LGL stories if he was an international event, right? Because he's done that. Yeah. And then NA caster is very good at telling NA, but then obviously maybe if they have a minor specialization in that. But I feel like a lot of the time we're in a position now where cohesively, despite the talent team being made up of mostly casters from NA, EU, and then like people who do like a LCK and then LPL, I feel like a lot of the minor regions, a lot of the time there's more meticulous effort being made towards telling those stories, and I think that is important, even if they're minor regions, which would indicate that it would be less important. I don't think that's the case. I'm just saying, like, semantically or whatever. But I think it's really important to build a more comprehensive picture, and it brings more people into the fold. I think the fold is super important.
Yeah, I think there's really cool stories in the LoL esports. Like one for me was like Zeka convincing Kingen to join his team, and that was something that Ashley King had done an interview on like months prior. And when I was just like prepping, I saw it, and I was like, oh, let's bring this up. And I think other people brought it up too. I'm not saying I was the one who pushed that, but I'm just saying like you discover these really cool things and you bring them up. But if you were a fan of the LCK, I don't know how many times you might have heard that story the entire time. Yeah. So like to that point about like, I think one thing that's cool is when you can almost pick out like the diamonds of all the narratives, because like you get fresh eyes on it. So like, I can go and look at the let's say CB LOL, and like I don't know all the context around every single thing as someone who's just peeking my head in temporarily, but like the best ideas from the local casters get put in like docs and all this stuff, and we get the best of the best to tell. And because it's more bite size, I think it feels a lot better for viewers who are hearing it for the first time.
Well, I think sorry, go on.
Well, I was like one specific thing I'd pick up on is that, like, if I compare this to the start of LCS, like the first 2 weeks of LCS, right? So we're looking at a similar level of newness. I think there's a much better spread here, and I think that could come back to the point of where there's experts for each bit. But at the start of the LCS, we were talking about Doublelift and Bjergsen coming back. We were talking about FlyQuest investiture, but I feel more connected now to people like Loud, people like PSG. I understand their teams, their players, and their storylines better than I did about Dignitas, CLG, and etc. at the start of the LCS split, because I just feel like they've done a really good way of getting a really balanced amount of storylines and connection off about all the teams playing, rather than just hyper focusing on the easy big storylines like the GG one. They've actually been able to really explain and connect us to all of the teams.
Because what the fuck are you supposed to say about Dignitas?
Well,
I think that's part of it, right? Is like Loud shows up at this event, and there's
we didn't know they were going to feed, right?
well,
no, I'm just saying, but I think Loud gets to this event, and they've done a bunch of cool things, and they have a big cool story. Dignitas is just sort of like, well, Dignitas made a roster again. Let's see if they sell the org sometime this year.
I don't agree with this completely, by the way.
Go for it,
So
yeah.
I think that ultimately there is a story to be found everywhere. Like, I think although certain orgs and certain narratives will be an easier sell, I think if you look into it enough, that there is always an element of a sell to be made with every org. And I don't think that, like, just because the story might not be like that immediately obvious, that it like means you just sell them up the water, because I think every team should have a reason for people to care about. And that's not on the viewer or us a lot of the time, but like I think it's on the orgs and the broadcast.
No. I stole his mic. It's my turn to answer. I think the other thing too that we haven't talked about, which could be actually a big factor in this, is format. Best of ones in a more fast-paced setting, like the start of a regular season, where you are doing like meta hits and like what's new and like what's new with NA and all these things. You have to pick your battles a little bit more, and it quickly gets smeared out, like all this stuff. Whereas like you come to watch a best of 3 or a best of 5. One, we have 15-minute pre-show for this thing, and then we have games between the games, or time between the games, to break down these things. And like good casters and analysts are all very competent about weaving in these narratives. You know, being like, what a great game for Licorice. He popped off on the Cassante this game, and this is something that's, you know, back in the day when he was on C9 debuting as a rookie, blah, 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 and you work it into your analysis.
Yeah, for sure.
And because it's more targeted and you're not pre-game, post-gaming, because those go to different teams, you have 4. So, for example, to get really technical, you have a 15-minute turnaround time roughly between games. Let's just say it's equal for both. But in a traditional regular season best of 1 model, you then have to do post-game for what just happened in the game, tell those stories, blah, 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 go to break, come back, pre-game for 2 new teams. It's like so many more things that you have to juggle in the air. And it probably leads to a less concentrated hit on the narratives that maybe the caller is feeling a little bit, where you're just dedicated to these 2 teams, and that's it.
So the other thing I will say is, like, because it sounds, and I saw Nightmare agreeing with you in the chat, like,
Well, that's just because he's from the UK.
oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's solidarity. 1776, baby. All right, so the
Oddly political.
the
That's kind of what we do. Just random odd. We always throw in random political.
I mean, how political is the war for independence?
Are you making an argument for the
It was very political at the time, but I just don't know if like I'm making a political argument right now.
You're making an argument for the languid beauty of independence.
So I think it's more historical at this point. So yes, there is always a story to be told.
Yeah.
And that is a very like. But from my perspective, and maybe this is just the cynical person who's been doing this for so long, that is sort of the philosophy I think I would have had a long time ago. The challenge is when you end up with orgs and players and situations at the bottom of the totem pole who are like losing a ton, the organization is likely on the way out, and they... like you also know that there's going to be a ton of roster turnover.
Yeah.
It becomes really hard to get excited to tell those stories, and you oftentimes feel very burned. So case in point, and this is not even like the best case because they were a team that was like kind of worth it, and a player that was kind of worth it, but like there was a great story multiple times told about Takui for FlyQuest last year. And people became really big fans of his, and then
I think that was a really good
example. And then he immediately left the LCS, and you end up feeling as a storyteller very jaded and frustrated because you go out there and like I've always felt like part of my job, even from the very first time I did my show, was to help try to build fandom about the players and get people excited about them. And it's so disheartening when you spend a lot of time on something like this and then it doesn't materialize. And I think with Dignitas, it is really tough because when they start losing a ton, the story of, oh, we're trying really hard, but we're still losing and it's tough. Like there is an interesting story there. And like in a docuseries or something like that, you can compare and contrast what's happening in different orgs where like, oh, maybe everything's going great for Golden Guardians and they're winning and it's amazing. And then you have like Jensen, who's this storied veteran, like really struggling. But whenever it becomes like the broadcast that just has to sort of talk about the stuff or put together a small package or whatever, it becomes really hard to.
Yeah, I don't think orgs help themselves in this regard. I mean, this is one of the things we spoke about when we first met each other. We were talking about like sort of longevity of a lot of. It feels like, I don't know. There's like a weird. Oh, we had one bad split. Let's just get everyone out the front door. And it feels like if you felt like you were going to commit this amount of money initially, surely you saw this going on for like you must have accounted for risk management in the first split, right? Like. Surely, guys, like we didn't spend as much money, and we thought like, you know, that's just like the first like if you're like a capitalist in any way, like at least be good at like that's like the number one thing about being a capitalist is you account for like the bad stuff, right? Like anything could happen, like a meteorite could hit the gaming house, and like you can't play the first 3 weeks, and that's why you lose. Surely we're not getting rid of like all these guys that we spent all this money on in the first split. So I hard agree with you on that part. Yeah.
Anyway, we've got obviously a little bit off topic, but I appreciate the call in.
What I got from that was, you know, you're jaded. This industry's chewed you up. It's spit you out. You're not the same young, fresh beat journalist on the walk anymore.
Yeah, I think the if anybody has ever seen the opening scene of The Newsroom, I feel like that oftentimes, where I am frustrated, and yet I still have this like core within me of optimism and hope because I know that the LCS can be so much better than what it is right now. It has that possibility, and yet we're still beaten down by the same like crummy decisions that are made. And so I think it's actually the worst of both worlds, where like I feel the pain of knowing where we are right now, but also have to witness that like we can't get out of this rut. You know, it is rough.
For sure.
Anyway, Izzdaer, thank you so much for calling in. What do you want to shout out here at the end?
Shout out to catching up with Double Lift. I hope you do something similar next season. That was really, really cool.
Thank you.
I'll see you guys at MSI next week.
Oh, great.
In there a couple of days. And cat for Kobe.
Oh, God. Goodbye. All right. One quick thing. I know, Mark, you probably have people that are trying to come in, but we didn't ever touch at all on the Academy stuff.
We're in the middle of an international competition, and that's actually like 3-week-old news based off Travis's reporting. So we'll talk about that some other time when there's not more important things.
I've got something to say about it. Very quickly.
Very quickly.
Mark wants to watch Your Name with a bunch of people.
I made plans for other people. I've already gone 40 minutes over when we initially blocked this out in my day, which is my only dark day off, after I already also did story meetings and worked 6 straight broadcast days in a different country, and I'm trapped in a hotel room, and like, God forbid I tried to do one thing for myself. Might be.
You're not trapped.
Jesus. Do you want to talk about it? I mean, I guess you kind of already
I want
did.
You to say your bit.
You kind of already did.
You say your bit.
Say your bit.
I think one of the main reasons between the ERL structure working so well in Academy is socioeconomic concerns and disparities between the different countries and how it's set up. And I'm not going to elaborate on that. You're just going to have to kind of take that and think about it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Let's do a round of shout-outs. Mark, what do you want to plug?
Your Name.
I want to plug the Licorice interview that I just dropped. If you enjoyed my Yike interview that got taken down by the syphilitic scabs of on the Bell End of Mankind that are the Reddit mods, you can go check out my new GG Licorice interview at Ruddy Corp. That's RUDDYCORP on Twitter. And big up Ruddy up. All of that. I don't have a gang sign to throw up because we're not a gang. We're a professional limited company. But shout out to my Regan as well.
C.
This is probably, you guys are probably doing something offensive.
Yeah, we probably can't walk
Especially
around in
when
some
you
America.
Yeah,
we can't walk. There's like some American neighborhood we can't walk around.
It's a real problem I have.
Mark did this on the broadcast as well. They were trying to. Okay, whatever. People have seen the tweet. All right. Anything
Shout out to
else?
my mom as well.
Okay, great.
She's great.
Mark, when are we getting?
I'm pressing this.
No. Stop. When are we getting Blame Game back?
Whenever I can.
Shout out to everybody who is watching. Really appreciate it. I know this is at a different time. Mark will be back in North America the next time we do this. And so I don't know what that will mean for timing, but just stay tuned. Thank you to Jake for coming on. Very last minute, but I think it was really fun having you on. And for everyone else, shout out to OnePlus and Alienware, and we'll catch you soon.